Welcome to the CST, the Center for Complex Systems in Transition, where we try and, amongst other things, create innovative spaces for meeting, gathering, thinking, working together. Just a little bit of context here. My name is Rika Preiser. I know many of you, but there are some that I also don't know, so very, very welcome here. The center is based on an old farm. This is the Mostersdrift farm. The old farmhouse is here. The nature reserve is next to us, and in that side we have the STIAS, the Stellenbosch Institute for Advanced Studies. So it's a kind of a innovative space to connect people in different ways and to undermine, I would say, traditional structures of disciplines and thinking, and to come up with some kind of a collaboration, in a sense, academic and practical collaboration. This used to be the old stables of the farm, so it's a difficult space to hold formal meetings in, and often we don't find it possible to have a kind of a screen in here and to be placing people. It's nice to see how this is working today, and thank you very much for everyone that's contributed to change the space as well, so that we could fit in here and be together. But today's, so we often have these kinds of meetings, which we call Anthropocene dialogues, where we try and get together and speak about sort of topics that's interesting about human nature relations, how we interact and how we think about the Anthropocene differently. And one, I would say, mode or deviation of that format today is what we call Art of Collaboration. And I would just like to introduce our special guests that are here from the UK. First of all, Professor Michel Pimbert, who is the who's the director at the Center for Agroecology, Water and Resilience. I always just read Agriculture and Water Resilience, but I like that and resilience. So thank you very much for coming here and visiting Stellenbosch during this week and taking the time to be with us. And the invitation was sort of, I would say, heated up and supported very strongly by Mich Fabre-Levé and Dr. Flora Hardy, who both, so Mich is a PhD student at CORE, and Flora they are both artists in residence at the center. They've developed a kind of an interface or a platform which they call Touchstones, which is an art and research practice where they experiment with different kinds of ways of combining research and art practice. But they will tell us a little bit more about that. So our real sort of engagement today here is about exploring what's happening at CORE. How we have been engaging in the past already. We have had several engagement together in the last 2 years, especially with the Sustainability Institute, who's hosted them also for several residencies the past years. Jess Schulschenk is also here as the director of the Sustainability Institute. And thank you also for your support in bringing them over and hosting them for this residence as well. We're very welcome to be able to benefit from that generosity as well.
Several of you have asked me to say a little bit about what CORE is, the Center for Agroecology, Water and Resilience, and maybe I can do that to provide the context of Mich and Flora's work. So you're just outside Coventry, about 5 miles out of Coventry, and our centre is located on the campus of Garden Organic, which is a charity set up 60 years ago to work exclusively with organic gardens across the UK. So this centre has been a pioneer in citizen science, working with, they didn't call it citizen science, but they were doing it before the time. And it's also this will interest you, Frida, it's also on the campus we have a heritage seed library which was set up by the founder of Garden Organic. And the heritage seed library contains all kinds of vegetable varieties that are forbidden on the European catalogue. There was a time in Europe when we had catalogues erected, and this catalogue basically disciplined the whole landscape of seeds, and lots of heirloom varieties were crossed off by the seed industry that was already beginning to shape the regulatory framework. And at Garden Organic we have a heritage seed library of some very old types of variety, which are actually maintained through this network of organic gardeners. So it's quite unique as a sort of community-based in-situ conservation, very dynamic, and breaking the rules in the sense that we shouldn't be doing this, but we have a protection from Prince Charles, who's the patron of Garden Organic. So it's kept the law out of our hair. It's quite amazing. But anyway, Garden Organic is a place for popular education. Currently about 20,000 people come here every year to learn about how do you make compost, control weeds without using pesticides, and also get ideas about garden designs for small spaces. This is our home, and it's a very, very supportive environment for the kind of things we do. We work on agroecology, water, and resilience. We're very explicit about our approach, which is to develop alternative food systems to the industrial model, which we find deeply problematic in terms of carbon footprint, social equity, ecological footprint. So we work on alternatives to industrial food and farming, and this is our base. We can actually do some work there, but obviously we work with other groups across the UK, in Europe, in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, in both urban and peri-urban and rural contexts. So that's the sort of learning research environment we're very privileged to be in, and it's a remarkably good thinking environment. We all feel very zen after the day. It's very relaxing compared to the campus of Coventry University, which is essentially a concrete jungle. Now inside, the inner space is also very important, very supportive. Our community of practice is made up of social and natural scientists. A very good gender balance. I think there are more women than men, in fact. We have 45 scholars from the natural science and social sciences, and we have about 40 PhD students present. So it's quite a large community now. We're close to 100 because we also have support staff. And the atmosphere is very, very collegial. We're able not to reproduce many of the habits and cultures that prevail on the main campus, which is quite corporate, and we have a very different culture, and that's noticed. Which means that it's quite a creative environment with a lot of self-organizing going on the stuff, and that's very, very important for nurturing creativity. And it's a safe space to experiment. That's very important, and deliberately so. So it's a mix of social and natural scientists, and what we're trying to do is encourage transdisciplinary ways of knowing. We're going beyond multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, to embrace transdisciplinary ways of knowing. But forms of transdisciplinarity that don't just involve well-known tribes of disciplinary experts. We take very seriously people's knowledge, the knowledge of women, men, farmers, water users, labourers, and people from different ethnic groups, and also different sexual orientations. And that is a very, very strong point in the centre, that we're trying to embrace transdisciplinary ways of knowing, which entails a lot of experimentation with methodologies. You know, it's okay to say transdisciplinary practice, but how do you put it together? What are the kind of methodologies and institutional innovations needed? So there's a lot of thought put into that. Now, as part of that transdisciplinary approach, very early on, I felt it was necessary to find a place for the art and humanities. It's not good enough to just have social and natural scientists and work with people's knowledge. What about, you know, the art and humanities perspective? And that was the context that led me to invite both Mish and Flor to join the centre as artists in residence. I think within the first year we've been in existence for nearly 5 years. So within the first year, there's a sort of honeymoon period when you're allowed to do all these things. And Mish and Flor have been very much part of that community. And it's not just, you know, to be diverse. There are also very, very good reasons, and I think you'll understand when I read this quote from James Highwood Rowling, who says that the arts and sciences are twin peaks in human cognition, and neither should be privileged in research practices. So that's the challenge, you know, that then led to the formulation of Nietzsche's thesis, which is going to tell us about. With us recognizing that transdisciplinary practice, transdisciplinary research works between disciplines, beyond disciplines, and within disciplines. And we try and recognize the essential unity of knowledge, as Jean Piaget said very early on in the genesis of transdisciplinary thinking. Now, having said that, it's not easy. I don't want to give you the impression that we've got it all sorted out. These are huge challenges. They do with paradigm change in the production of knowledge and how it's validated and who validates it. So this is a remarkable social experiment that we're allowed to engage with in Coventry University, and it's housed in this Centre for Agroecology, Water and Resilience, which incidentally works on things like resilient food and water systems, so agroforestry, multiple cropping, agriculture, stuff that moves you away from monocultures and genetically uniform landscapes, to community self-organization for resilience. How do people organize in their communities to deal with adversity, shocks and stresses, to looking at more fundamental processes like the influence of climate change on water dynamics and floods and droughts and their incidents, and can we develop predictive tools, to big policy stuff, big issues around governance, around policies and institutions for resilient food and water system, where we really engage public, private sector and looking at big governance issues, knowing that it's no point having islands of success. We need to be able to sort of shift the system, and inevitably he's talking about the policy and institutional context and how you can change that. And finally, we have a cross-cutting group known as People's Knowledge and Transdisciplinarity, which tries to bring in decolonizing research methodologies, participatory methodologies, theatre of the oppressed, participatory video, in the mix of quantitative and qualitative research that we do, to better approach reality, understand it, and generate meaningful outcomes. And of course, within that context, there's a place for the arts and humanities. And that's where I'm going to turn over to you, because I've talked far too long already. But various people asked me, can you say something about CORE? CORE, yeah, that's how we call it. It's a Welsh name that means whale. So that's the Centre for Agroecology, Water and Resilience, where we are, who we are, what we do, and how we work. And one strand of our work is artful inquiry, which has been led by Nish and Flora. Over to you.
Thank you, Michelle. And maybe as part of the mix later, we'll also hear about how CORE has future visions, which in a sense I would say we're all contributing to. So, first of all, get out. Oops. This is hot off the press. And I'd like to say a deep thank you to Rika for this invitation. And Chris is disappeared.
She might be tucked away.
Chris.
She's always here, somewhere.
Chris is my supervisor from the other side. So I have my director of studies here, I have my South African advisor, and Patricia Gasha, who is in England at Bristol University, is very much in the room with me. So I think there are a couple of things before I begin working into the slideshow, is to just maybe share some of Chris's words. If we, our organizations, and other than human world upon which we depend, are to flourish, then we must carry the responsibility to become more wholly human, not merely acknowledging that we come to know in diverse ways, but to actually live and be in ways which invite the artful and the intellectual, the embodied and the theoretical, the hearty and the heady, with equal thoroughness and enthusiasm. I would hope that I'm doing justice to Chris's life, to her words, and to her thesis, which was very much about breaking the boundaries of a presentational form, even of the thesis itself. And she came up with this term and concept, artful inquiry. She was very much an action researcher, but she was looking at how can we add artistic processes, the medium of the arts as a transformative practice into action research, so that we weren't just always privileging words and the linear and the intellectual. And I think this quote really, in a way, has been my beacon. So, how do we actually embody, how do we live and be in ways which invite the artful and the intellectual, the embodied and the theoretical, the hearty and the heady? A term that I keep using, and I use as with my friends, with my life as a human being, it's like, please, can we have a bit of spaciousness in our time together? Can we not pack everything into, I'll see you for an hour and then I'm heading off to the next hour meeting, or even I'm going to another party, or I'm going to this, or I'm going to that. How do we create a sense of openness and expansiveness in our encounter with each other as human beings to really deeply dwell with what it is that we're engaged with? And slowly, slowly, I began to realize that this word spaciousness was more than just, oh, let's have a relaxing time, let's make an open space, let's not know. It actually was integral to the way in which I was doing my research. And the more I thought about it, and the more I read, in the last 6 months, I've become aware of spaciousness as an actual propensity, a quality, a principle that actually is required for us to think well. And I came across this beautiful work by Philip Shepherd, who was writing New Self, New World, and that the idea of assimilating intelligence of the Logos mind depends on a sense of spaciousness. Only where there is spaciousness enough to accommodate our sensitivities of the whole can we feel the whole. But where do we begin with even recognizing that there is a whole? I begin with my body, my own body. How do I bring my own body, my body that has many, many ways of knowing that are not just located in my intellect, not just located in my head, not just located in the papers that I read, which I then refer to. How do I open up to expanding the many ways of knowing that Chris Seeley spoke about, and in fact are the ways in which are privileged and brought into a real highlighting at core? Many ways of knowing. We are multiple intelligences. We have intuition, we have imagination, we have heartbeat, we have emotions, we have voices, we have so many, we have movement. How does research embrace that so that we don't become these boxes churning out battery thinking and regurgitating ways of being that only in a way privilege observation and a kind of reproduced, re-represented knowing that is about knowledge rather than wisdom? So how can we become wiser within our bodies? Which is why, in a sense, my research is dedicated to the body-mind and to recognizing that we are not just a body, we are not just a mind, but actually the mind, and as we know in many of the Asian and Eastern philosophies, body and mind are intertwined. They are of relationship within each other. You cannot just have a body, you cannot just have a mind. And what has been introduced through my research is the idea and the concept of the artful, that actually, how do we move beyond an understanding of art, which is just about making beautiful photographs or making marks on a wall or creating sculptures? How do we extend and expand our relationship to the art so that they are what's known as, in the words of Joseph Beuys, an extraordinary German artist who was also an environmentalist, helped to set up the Green Party in Germany. He talked about social sculpture, and that we are all artists because we are all creating our lives, and actually artfulness for me, is an expanded way of understanding what the art can be that is a medium for transformation. And that's essentially what I'm seeking to theorize within my PhD. At the same time, I'm also a political animal. I understand that there's such a thing as my own body-mind within the context of social norms. And those social norms are not based on ones where everybody is equal. Which means that if I'm really deeply going to inquire and become an artful body-mind, I have to be a bit canny. I like the word artful dodger because he was always kind of finding ways around things. So I like the word artful rather than art-based because it's about first of all, it's inclusive. I feel it's much more inclusive when we talk about artful rather than I'm an arts-based researcher. It also brings that idea of the canny and the sort of the mischievous and the sort of let's be a bit of a disruptor. And so, in a way, through the arts, I feel that we can be bringing a transformation that invites a recognition that there's such a thing as oppression and inequality. And so my research has also been, how do I bring my own artful body-mind as a conscious human being into a research field which finds a way of talking about oppression in a way that doesn't have to kind of like flag it up as a red flag, but actually a noticing, and that it becomes actually, the research is actually a healing process. It's not just a protest research. It's not just we need to really kind of get this campaign going as a research project, but to say it's here, it exists. How do I find ways to address it, to engage with it, to encounter it, and let it be a place of healing? And in that, the work that I came across, which again just deepened my understanding of how theory can be a research sanctuary. Theory is not something to place outside of ourselves. Theory comes from within ourselves. And Bell Hooks, a radical black feminist scholar and activist who founded Berea College and has done beautiful writings. And again, you can see she's a radical because she only has lowercase. And she found a sanctuary in theorizing. She writes, I found a place where I could imagine possible futures, where life could be lived differently. Fundamentally, I learned from this experience that theory could be a healing place. So as research practitioners who are looking to be embodied, to bring the whole of ourselves into research in order to be transforming social cultures and mores and norms into much more of a space of healing and well-being in this society, how do we start embodying action and practicing a theorizing that comes from not just outside ourselves but inside ourselves, and engage also, as she said, it's like there's no point in doing theory where I'm talking about my black liberation unless in my everyday I'm also engaging in that struggle with the people that I'm with. So that's what I trust that my research is embodying, is actually not just saying this is what we all need to be doing, but actually myself being engaged in that personal transformation as well as the social transformation. And that's why the theoria has been very important to me, because if I'm doing a practice-based research, which is what we're calling it, practice as research, from the practice emerges the theory. The idea of theoria, that it's about contemplation, it's about being with, it's about participating. And that as a researcher, my research is an act or actions of witnessing and receiving. So these are some of the images that have come out of my research that has been done at Spear Farm, which came out of my Living Cultures residency, artist residency with Sustainability Institute, through Jess's invitation, again an invitation that came through having met us, actually probably not even having met us, she met our food. And at the Sustainability Institute, over one of the master's courses where we were invited to make a lunch from what was from the garden. And then a year later, or even actually 6 months later, we were invited back, and the understanding and the condition was is that this was continuing to evolve my own research practice as a PhD student and be in a relationship to the culture of research of the SI. I was not prepared to just come and do my own research for myself, and the understanding was very beautifully met, and it was an exchange which came out of a trust, a responsiveness to emergent properties, which in a way is part of what the arts brings into this PhD. So these were examples of what we did, and Jess came to that field table, and all the food, and so did Elfrida, all the food, and Theo was there too. All the food came from within 5 miles of the place and was shared as a bare awakening food. And the question we were asking ourselves, what is the future of food and farming in this culture in South Africa? But the real question that everybody was then invited to write up at the end of the meal, they were invited to ponder on the question before they began, what are you hungry for? And at the end, how has your hunger been satisfied? So that all of this is within my research. Thank you. Artful inquiry, the term from Chris Seeley, taking on her baton, extraordinary woman, brought clowning into her PhD research. She was a management consultant, worked over Africa, and she was interested in how could we body forth the material that would actually help research become really more engaged with social change through its own presentation. So the manuscript didn't just look like 80,000 words of writing. It was filled with her own biography, her own autobiography, pictures of people that she was working with, and a lot of it is not actually very named and defined. It was a really completely radical kind of PhD called Wild Margins, playing at work and play. It is really worth looking at. And she was very true to some of the theory of action research, which was about how does presentational knowing add to another form of knowing. But again, she was still working within the idea of 4 kinds of knowledge. And I think what I'm moving beyond and with her is to try and understand how, instead of only working with clowning to embody research, how do we embody research by all just being in a relationship to the matter of food? So that's been my medium, has been food. How am I doing? Let's see. Well, in a way, action research is my sanctuary as well, because it offers a political and an emancipatory way of thinking about myself as very much part of and integral to the research, to really try and have an ethical compass on who I am by making many different kinds of practice, by engaging in many practices which are about self-awareness raising, and I'll come on to that later. It's also about what does it mean to look into, as Chris again states, what are our living bodies? Where are our living bodies within research? That's from one of Chris's notebooks. So the aesthetic and ethical acts is a very important aspect of what I'm seeking to do in the research, and how to really make ethical an ethos which is embedded in place, and where ethical acts are not things that you have to read about and are sort of a part of a code. They just in a way come out of the relationship you have with a place and with yourself and with another and with the more than human world. Maybe you'd like to just share some of this. Is Flora, my thinking partner, who basically has really helped me bring to life what it means to put an ethical compass to oneself, because I can do all sorts of practices, but again it's quite interesting to have a witness and a reflector who basically can also help me see another perspective. So this has been another aspect of my research, which I'm bringing as an innovation and a contribution to methodology.
Yeah, so maybe to share a little bit more about this idea of a thinking, feeling partner, which has been my role within this realm of arts practice. So I identify as an artist, but also as a researcher. And I think, given that the challenges to Michelle, you referred to this idea of the twin peaks, that we're trying to rebalance a little bit the ways in which the arts are perceived within research alongside science. And one of the challenges is talking about validity and trustworthiness and how that can be made visible. So we're not just falling back on the idea that something's anecdotal or wholly subjective or wholly personal, but how do you begin to create and make visible to others the rigour behind the research that you're doing? And Mish has accomplished this in many different ways. One thing you've spoken about, making your own biography and your own methodologies, your own engagements very visible, and writing them and showing and sharing them. The other is that at the very beginning of your PhD, we'd been in a practice together working as collaborative artists, but Mish invited me to be her thinking, feeling partner. And the reason she did this was she wanted to have a kind of ethical check on her research. She knew that it was going to be an enormous challenge as an artist to enter into academia and practice some of her methodologies, but also she personally wanted to have a sounding board. And so my role as a thinking, feeling partner, and I'll just move forward perhaps to the relevant slide here, and we were exploring this idea that my role was to support her thinking, and to do that through artful processes. So very early on, we discovered listening thinking practices whereby Mish, using our touchstone here, may be very full with a set of experiences or ideas or something that she's read, and we use the touchstone, which is why we're called touchstone. And what this is a practice that's very carefully structured through protocols of confidentiality, of reciprocity, and of trust, whereby Mish will hold the touchstone, and while she has it, my role is to just be an active listener and to affirm her thinking as she thinks through an idea. She may at the end invite me to reflect or offer some kind of thought based on what she shared, but essentially I'm just there to let her think out loud. And in that process, she may need to release some feelings, she may need to do some gestures, she may need to move around the space, but it's a chance to think without any judgment, without any notion that I'm going to advise or intervene. The other practice that we have developed through the doctoral research is my own work as an artist, drawing very intuitively and without any sense of knowing what I'm drawing in response to her practice. So she may hold a ritual space and do some work around her research, and I'll witness it, and afterwards I move to draw. And I don't know what that drawing means, but together we will explore it and discover how it's offering another perspective on her work. So here, a little bit small, but this first drawing here happened very early on in the PhD, and it was called Held Within the Eye Socket, Freedom to be Seen. And the idea was that she, as a researcher, has her own eye, her own perspective, but that I can offer another lens to see perhaps a little wider, or see something that she may physically not have been able to see because she was looking in a particular direction. And I know Tessa is having an interesting response to this drawing. So this sort of began to unpack this idea of what another can do and the ethics of having somebody alongside you, constantly checking out and checking in with you. But also I was able to document her work as she was doing it, so Mish could be fully present and fully engaged with the sort of social dynamics of what was happening. I could be there to transcribe or record or document what she was doing. And towards the third sort of end of her research, what began to happen is I began to find that my drawings were very trustworthy, and that I could draw from my own artful body-mind what I had experienced. And when we then analysed those drawings together, what we discovered is they revealed kind of patterns and forms and conditions that we hadn't kind of conversationally ever noticed. So I personally have been very privileged to be part of this sort of proto methodology because it brings an incredible call to be incredibly clear about one's own investment in other people's thinking. I could be living vicariously through her courageous endeavours. I could be sort of, spinning my own kind of biography into what she was doing. And so through this process, actually, we've had to hone some really deep boundary making. I had to be incredibly clear about my own biography, my own trauma with my own PhD, how I might be kind of vicariously expressing things through her work. But I think what it opened up for me was this idea of the intimacy of research and the challenges of working in collaboration. And in a way, our work together has been a bit of an experiment into both the benefits of it, but also the pitfalls, the challenges of trespass, the challenges of imposing my own thinking onto her thinking. But it is something that I believe, and we've had conversations, Rika, about this, that as we embrace these ever more complex transdisciplinary, post-disciplinary realms of inquiry, as we really engage with kind of transformative research, these are enormous emotional, personal journeys, and actually having an ally, having a companion with you to witness and support you and help you think, actually I think is becoming ever more important and actually essential. Otherwise, I think one risks either burdening oneself with an overwhelming emotional journey or just stopping that emotional journey, that potential for inner transformation that can happen through research as a sanctuary. So I've been incredibly honoured to be one of Misha's 4 key methodological contributions. Maybe just to take over the steering of this, this sits alongside Misha's own very deep personal inquiries that happen where she's not only I think what we've failed to mention is that Misha's medium is food, and so we're travelling on the Shosholoza and it's 35 degrees, there's no central heating. She's true to her practice of always knowing where her food comes from, always knowing the growers, always trying to understand how every mouthful, every day, we're making a decision about our food geographies. So here she is practicing her own gastrosophy, her own relationship to the ethics of food on the Shosholoza train. Here's her exploring the idea of dwelling in our own soil. What does that mean? Through an artful process. Here's her unpacking traumatically her first draft PhD and discovering that it's far too linear, far too conformist, and has to break out into a new form. Incredibly painful 3-day process of anxiety and questioning and torturous work with collage. How exciting. Here a ritual.
Witnessed all the way through and filmed.
And documented, so there's that safety of the witness and somebody. And then towards the end here, Mish using her own ritual practice to uncover some of your own intellectual oppression that you experience. Inevitably, we, through the entrainment of schooling, have pieces of ourselves that feel they need to perform in certain ways. And actually, if we're trying to move beyond that entrainment, it brings up a lot of fear. And here is Mish burning some of that fear.
Maybe just to show that not only is the artful to do with working with matter, even in the presentation of a proposal, that's one of Flora's drawings. That's one of what we called her kind of drawings, which kind of mapped out, again, very spontaneously, what we would do when we were being invited back to the SI. And that's how we first proposed. When Jess invited us to think about it, we went back to her with that. Now, obviously, that then became a little more linear after that, but the point was that was our sort of springing ground. And it had life, and actually most of what we were intending and the objectives were pretty much fulfilled, and the fact is that it continues. So I would like to, if I may, just I've spoken about the action research, that I'm really working with my own transformation, with transformation that happens through another, then inviting groups to co-inquire with me about the practices, so how is it impacting on their own learning journeys, their own skills development. And then the third person aspect of the action research is that how does it impact and influence and expand within an organization. And I think this research has been showing that in fact Art of Collaboration is kind of showing how that has gone beyond my own transformation of another through our collaboration, and of those who have been part of my research, is that actually we're all on this journey together. And it has been a very responsive and emergent journey that never had a plan. And in a sense, Art of Collaboration has come out of that emergence, out of that responsiveness, out of that trust, and out of that unknowingness. And that, I would say, is very much, these are principles and qualities that we are really seeking to embed within our art of collaboration, but certainly what my research is seeking to amplify and make visible and say, hey, these are as important as scientific processes and procedures, which are very clear-cut, very quantitative. So it's about how do we blend the quantitative with the qualitative. And then just, I think I'm
more or less what you... So this
about to kind of wrap up. So let's see.
That was...
And that was the end, and that was, and basically that was dwelling with place, what we have done through place. And that has brought us to evolving the art of collaboration, which I think would be a wonderful way to sort of move into how Rika would like to share some of her journey with us. And then we're going to have an open space where we'd love to just continue the conversation about what the art of collaboration tangibly might start looking like. We're in a process of great experiment, as well as very clear. We have a frame. We have a frame. We have a frame of time. We have a frame of trust and the alliances. But essentially, this is what we're looking to open up to today.
So if I just say a few words to tie that together. As you can sort of feel, and I think sense, is that this whole journey of your doctoral research has been one of an art of collaboration in itself, that you found in the Sustainability Institute, Jess, in your community, we found with the CST, we found, Theo, with your Emerging Agroecology Academy work, we found with other farm communities, we found a soil, a receptive soil of potential. And for the last year and a half, it's clear that some of the experiences that we shared during your doctoral research, Mish, have a life, and they're continuing. There's a kind of a sense in which the conversation's not over. In fact, the conversation's just beginning. And so during this year, we've been remotely via Skype in conversation with in person with Michelle, who was very much supportive of this idea, but also remotely with Jess and with Rika and with Theo, this idea of creating a more formal intention to embark on a 5-year research journey together, which may grow to a 30-year or a 3,000-year endeavour, but essentially to begin with that intention for there to be a well-resourced 5-year alliance where some of these experiences, some of these insights that have been generated out of your research, Mish, but also in dialogue with others and their research, that those conversations can continue and can land in a grounded and tangible way within the homesteads of the partners. So for the Centre for Agroecology, Water and Resilience, for Jess at the Sustainability Institute, for Theo and the Agroecology Academy, and for you, Rika, and your community here at the CST. And so what you are part of is a week of being together as a core group. So in the room are our core alliance members, but in conversation with people who've been on the journey with us or who we want to be in conversation with. And we're looking for this week to be, as you say, Mish, both spacious, but also with a kind of firm intention that by the end of the week we will have in our hands, in our hearts, a strong sense of what it would be, what the programme will be, what the roles will be, and what the intention is over the next 5 years to manifest. So we've had an afternoon together already, and this gathering here is part of that conversation. And so we just marked here a few of the things that have begun to sort of find their voice around continuing this conversation about how the arts can enliven research and pedagogical practices. That feels very strong. That the idea that food and ritual and the whole idea of a sort of ethos of place, that's something to explore. The personal empowerment side and the idea of thinking feeling practices, and the idea of research residencies, these containments of time and intention where people can be in an exchange, come to the UK, or people come here and can be held and hosted for periods of time to do artist research residencies. So that's kind of where we are at in terms of holding the process. But as you say, Mish, it'd be really wonderful, Rika, just to hear from you in this space, a little bit of how this builds on work you've done. And I know you've got a short presentation.
So it sounds like the core from where we are also exploring where is the core from where we are actually acting when we're engaging. So my probably superficial engagement with this sort of art engagement was really very much born from some inspiration I found in my work on complexity, and with my supervisor, who also passed to the other life. We said that if we cannot calculate what the future should be like, we have to, if we can't use formal models and equations to define what the future would be like, or how how we should act and do what we should do in future, we have to start reimagining alternative options. And that form of reimagining is really embracing what it means to be the whole person into our research and engagement with one another. So based on that small line, we just had some kind of a justification to engage with people that were in our space, basically colleagues, friends, who were engaging with art and artful practices. This is just a small sort of summary of those kinds of things that we've had. So the first one is just called Food Revolution, and it's an installation of art pictures that you've seen maybe at the Sustainability Institute where you visited, which was co-sponsored once again by the Sustainability Institute, where we've actually installed artworks in public spaces and unusual spaces where people wouldn't expect to come against or see artwork. And these were all food-related ones, and the kinds of responses that came from that installations were quite unexpected and emergent. Just maybe to go back to the previous slide, Flo, yes. This one space was sort of gardens, but then also what we did is we had also these, we placed these images in a formal art museum. So in the Cecil University Museum, we interspaced these images next to the other formal permanent exhibitions to disrupt also that kind of the patterns and the spaces that were in there. And then we had people that could respond to what they saw and engage with, which was also kind of a way of facilitating that. Thanks. And then we had the Anthropocene Dialogue at the SI, which was in a huge collaboration between us, the SI and Mission Flow and some other artists, where we got together to sort of say, well, in a kind of an interesting exhibitive space, what can art do? How can art help us open up those spaces between ourselves, between others, between the physical surroundings? That was in 2016, and this is where our collaboration with Mission Flow started, where we had first no food, and we had kind of an art and a journey in the gardens of the SI, and there were some other artists there at that day that were all sort of experimenting with different ways of art and engaging people in different ways. So there were these different exhibits, but then also and this is what Sujay Sanan, a local artist, also tries through his artwork to show interconnections, how things are linked with one another, which is really great and useful sort of educational practices. And then we had the one, so just also so we just had very many sort of experiments with that. So you can maybe just flip over that. And this is our engagement with Mission Flow in this space, where we basically met in the garden, ate the food that was connected to the earth. We sat almost on the earth, and very tangible experience what it was like to be eating on a very hot day when the sun was boiling us, and experiencing really very much the physical presence of nature and those things that sort of construct or restrict us in a sense also in our physical awareness. Okay, and that's just sort of how we use that space interactively. Some encounters, just sort of engaging with those ideas that art can help us make worlds or behold worlds. It gives us different ways of seeing and being seen, recognizing, sensing, and how we can use that differently. Often art is always seen as a kind of a soft, fuzzy bunny, where artists are always presented as these people that, oh yeah, they have an idea and then they do something, but actually artists have a huge technical ability that they've trained and worked with for many years, in the same way that we who are statisticians build up models and also have that kind of a training. So how do we do not misrecognize the technical aspect and the rigor behind that specific way of seeing and engaging. And then we also used many different artists to present their artworks in conferences and to sort of disrupt the space of the conference also, and create meeting places for people to have different kinds of conversations, not just definitely academic ones, so it's always sort of linked to the academic theme, but using art as a kind of a way to fill in those spaces in between where people could connect with each other and have different conversations around different topics. We've also used it in our visioning exercises. On the table is a little booklet on how we used art to actually facilitate processes in visioning the future differently, and how that actually affected all those who were there. And then we also used some artists to document the work for us, of which we've benefited very much. So there we have our graphic harvester that was drawing whilst we were speaking, so he was capturing the events visually, and those visuals has really helped us to have a different way of communicating something that was very abstract and very technical at the same time, in a way that's tangible to other people in a 3-minute video, and give them a sense for that. So just a small summary. Our conclusion is how we've been using art can be used as a provocation to enable different kinds of dialogue and modes of engagement. By incorporating art and artists in facilitation processes, we create transformative spaces and different kinds of encounters and collaboration. It allows us to flex or stretch our imagination in a transformative capacity, and it fosters contemplative commons to help us to develop the worldviews, mindsets and social practices supportive of more just transformations toward resilient social ecological systems. So those are just words that will probably go into a paper. But this is, I think, how we've realized that, so it's, in a sense, it's a very instrumental way still of engaging with art, probably less superficial, or more superficial, but it's had its presence in our lives and in our processes and gatherings and encounters, to just sort of heat up the spaces and hold us, so that beholding becomes something more real in a sense.
That leads into a very paradoxical question.
I'm going to be very bold here. Because we're moving into our last hour, I just wanted to check. Did you feel that you had
Yeah, thanks. That's my last slide.
Yeah, because George, may we move into a little process where we actually start getting a sense of who's in the room, and then keep opening those questions and sharing some of our comments. Thank you so much. So, thank you all for your amazing attention to start with, and for this beautiful, beautiful space. And one of the things that I forgot to say, but basically because it's in my heart, what Michel has brought into our lives because of his belief and his trust in the arts and in our research has actually made possible all of this, because I wouldn't even know Jess, I wouldn't even know Rika. So thank you, Monsieur. Okay, and thank you to you, Monsieur Hayes, for documenting this, which is going to go to our, it's going to become an educational resource for ourselves, for CORE, for CST and for SI. What we'd love to do now, we can actually switch this off, don't you? Is try and get a sense of who's in the room, but in a way that sort of isn't just, okay, let's have a go round, but have something that continues to bring in what Theo brought very beautifully, expressed very beautifully yesterday, because as Flora said, we've had an afternoon of being with 7 of us at the SI. Actually, also I need to pause here, because I know two things that need to also be a little amplified is you've given a beautiful context of what CST has, how it has been giving a presence to the art, and Michelle's been given a beautiful context about how core is in a way creating also a crucible for this. But what would be really wonderful to hear too is how do you see art of collaboration in a way, you know, what is it, what is it, how do we move on from here? This is our presence moment. How do we move on from here? We've had our past, this is our presence, and maybe to also talk, Michelle will bring into this space, this open space, something about what is envisaged for core in a future time, because in a way this art of collaboration is not just about now. In fact, it's because of its kind of future evolutionary, somebody said, the beautiful idea of the evolutionary potential of the present. And I think that's what we're doing here, and it's about quantum time, so what's happened in the past has happened in the future, is happening now. Let's bring it all together. So just to notice that, let us not lose some of that into the mix. But yes, maybe Theo, would you like to just say a little bit, by beginning with the process of giving matter a presence within this forum, where we had a bowl of different artifacts, and how we spoke of what we imagined or envisaged what is the art of collaboration, which is still a very new and open, and it's a forming process which we're all part of. How we began was not to try and think about it with our heads, but to invite ourselves to be in a dialogue with an object, and to let that object somehow speak through us. So that happened yesterday, so we thought, well, let's bring you into what we did yesterday by bringing this here. And Theo came up with a beautiful way. He talked about the vibrating. And I thought, well, let's bring those vibrations here. But your sense of the tracking would be lovely to just bring us into a place. But would you like to choose an object?
Oh, yes. See.
This is what he chose. And maybe when we hold our object, you also just say a moment of who we are, what brings us here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So my name is Theo. I'm with the SI. I head the Agroecology Academy, and my role really is to bring the soul part of it, because it all centers around the soul. And yeah, for me, I think it's really the process, and I'm hearing that again today. It's about the sense of space and safety. And when George asked that question, how do you invite people? I was like, you know, and really, I think it's about, you know, those invitations and space and safety and yeah. So for me, you know, this is about birthing. This is about giving life. And it's not so much about the content, but it is about the context as well, you know, and what kind of context are we creating, and are this context really allowing the birthing, because without that context there will be no life, there will be no birthing, you know. So yeah, so this is my egg, which I'm going to put it back so that I can allow other people to talk. Thank you.
And maybe just to say this beautiful notion of tracking.
Yes.
What we're doing is tracking, so that we actually,
yes,
nothing is getting lost. It's a continuous thread. And us bringing those artifacts and objects here continues that tracking. Thank you for bringing that in.
Thank you.
So the idea is you allow yourself to be chosen by an object, and then you let yourself kind of introduce yourself, and then anything that you would like to be offering to the space, to ourselves, to each other, to CST, please. This is our time. We'll be in this kind of space for probably till about 10 to, so then we can have a kind of some sort of wrapping up and understanding what is next.
I think the argument...
Monsieur, you need to go and find your object, dear sir. Or shall I bring it to you?
I'm just talking about his object, the
That-
egg.
Dave, would you like to hold it? And then when you finish talking, it comes back.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
You are never birthed until you have encountered somebody. You have never been birthed until you have encountered somebody. we never grow from where we are until our eggshell has been destroyed. Not destroyed to kill you, but for you to be born. Because we can be so opinionated with our mindset about another person, about another society, that we never grow. It is a mature grown person that is able to evaluate much more of what he is a problem versus if he is a help. So it's not the object that you are seeing as much as what did this object expose of you is the issue. And art does that. It looks like an Ahmad here or something.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Now you must go. Yeah, that's it. Lovely. Sure.
I'm just going to follow you all around with an iPad.
Thank you. So hi, I'm Nadia. I know some people here, but I work at the CSR, which is the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, which is just across the way. And I think my research group thought they were taking quite a chance with me by employing me, because most of the people they work on kind of hard sciencey topics, and they thought including someone that had a more social science kind of inclination was a huge deal. But I've certainly operated within the same frames that most of them work in. I think what struck me is some of the conversations and being exposed to some of these around imagination and bringing imagination into kind of visioning processes and decision-making processes and acknowledging it in those spaces. I work a lot on kind of issues around human nature connections, and involved in a big kind of science assessment, a science policy assessment that's trying to envision these future nature futures, and really trying to create these scenarios, but it's with a teeny subset of people that are getting to determine what these futures might look like, and really thinking about and trying to do things in a different way, but convincing people to step out of their comfort zone is really hard, including myself. But it's been really interesting, and actually the minute you use some kind of creative process to bring people, everyone has imagination, and the minute they step out of their comfort zone, anything is possible. And I think it's trying to create those spaces where that can happen in more instances, and just show that a lot of the scientists that love to quantify and model can imagine a different world. And I chose this because my children are obsessed with jewels and anything shiny, and so I've always got my eye out for shiny things, and also I guess the texture, but I think a lot about the world that we're leaving for next generations, and also living with previous generations, kind of the ancestors that we kind of live with, and what that means to envision different futures. So I guess it's trying to think about them and how, are they included in these conversations at all, because we are essentially deciding on a world for them, so how to work within those difficult spaces. But thank you. Can I offer this to anybody? Anyone?
You can offer it to me.
Yeah.
I'm so torn between the vertebrates and the feather, which is strange. Yeah, okay. Thanks. So, Mish asked me when I arrived while I was here, and I automatically said, because I work upstairs. And then the whole time that you were speaking, I was thinking, what is it that actually draws me into these, these conversations? And I think what draws me in is because I like to be challenged to think about the world differently. So I work here and I'm a natural scientist, and you know, I started in like very quantitative research, and I love I like to be challenged, to be a bit uncomfortable. And I actually went to a conference recently where there was a lovely talk on learning and how learning happens in the uncomfortable spaces, which is also what you were saying now. And these kind of discussions encourage me to be in those more uncomfortable spaces, I think. But like you also said, it provides a safe space for being uncomfortable.
Don't be a masochist now.
And the other thing that I think is interesting is that I don't see myself as a creative person, but these kind of conversations make me think, I wonder where my crayons are. I know I've got crayons at home, and it inspires me to actually want to just like release some of that energy. I don't know where that comes from. So thank you for that. I don't know if it's the natural scientist in me that made me choose this, but I think it's good to remember lessons learned and where we've actually come from when we think about where we're going next. So this is kind of embedded, I suppose. That's why I like it. And it's art within itself. Who can I offer this offering? Oh.
True to my calling. Okay, so my name is Alfreda. As I work, I'm coordinating a regional program. It's called the Seed and Knowledge Initiative. And it's working, it's really started off as a process of strengthening community-based seed systems, which we don't have so much of in South Africa, but in the region is really what people depend on for their livelihoods. And I think what struck me is that it's not an academic world really, although we also do research and need research to validate your approach and the impact of it and so on. But I think the challenges in development work is also very, especially because it's fun. I've just been through a funding proposal, so I've kind of log framed out. But it's just really that struggle for development practitioners who are funded and bound by projects, and it can become, also very dry in a way, or sometimes the life is difficult to find anything. I think what we've tried to do is also also when you revive seeds and people's seed systems and their own seeds, it's not only about surviving and sort of economic survival and so on. It only really works or becomes alive if you connect to people's heart and their passion and their culture around the seed, and the beauty of it, and the livedness of that seed and their farm and their soil and so on. So there's a lot of art and beauty in that. And if you, also just in working with groups to bring in art, to start your day, with some piece of art, and then go into the thinking of writing stories and so on. And it's just really connecting with the whole person and the whole being, and it opens up something and makes it fun. So often, which can be quite sort of serious, heavy, sometimes work, So for me, and just that to because you were talking about imagining a future. It's so important in imagining, to bring imagination to people's thinking about the future. So I was looking at the circles that you drew, Rika, about the present, transition, and the future. So the one other process is to do is community mapping, where people map the past collectively. The whole community sits together and map how it used to be, and they draw it, and they draw pictures. And the men and the women separately. They have different, their territory, they experience it differently, and the present and what they imagine the future to be. So it's a visual presentation for people who struggle to sometimes articulate more academically. So it's really important, yeah. So that's what I'm doing. And I would, I think I'd love to connect with the collaboration. I was looking for, and it's so important also, the more people that do it, because I find it's really a struggle to validate it, one's approach with the world out there when it's data.
So the next question. This is struggling to I'm glad you chose the other one, so I don't have choice. So my name is Christy. I'm an ecologist. I work here at CST. And that's where thank you guys. It was really inspirational. I really loved your talk. I really loved the presence. I loved the energy you brought into this room and how you recreated the space. It's really inspirational. And I really appreciate, and that's what I appreciate about art, and it's the having that eye for detail. And I'm by no means an artist. I like dabbling and trying to create and paint but I think it's having that detail and at different levels. And I think that's why I was attracted to the feather, because if you zoom in at the microscope, it's like little barbs and how they're interconnected. It's the relationship of the little barbs. But if you zoom out, it's the feather, and it's how that's joined together around the spine, and then further out it becomes a bird, and it eventually becomes, I think, the whole system. And I really enjoy these conversations because I think it's very much about those relationships with the science and the ecology and nature and art, and I think it's also by appreciating the beauty, it reminds me of nature. And I find nature is my church. It is my spiritual place, and connected to the bird. I think it's just about being light, and I love that. And I think I try and live as lightly as possible. And I think art can also be that. You're creating something, but you're not having that impact on the earth and leaving a footprint. It's creating something, a lightness in beings. Thank you.
Christy, maybe just say, because Michelle doesn't know and other people, what's the particular project that you're working on? The one with Scott.
Which one is this?
Yeah.
The water.
The water. Oh, okay. So we have this project called Resilient Waters Project program. So it's basically based in the Okavango as a river basin system, and also in the Limpopo as a closed river basin system, and trying to look at bringing resilience into these systems, and how using water as a way of kind of collecting communities and working on sanitation and working on water security and food security, but also embedded in the ecology of the system. So looking at the social and ecological connections, and so bringing a resilience lens into these communities where they've been working in vulnerability and climate adaptation, but focusing more on resilience and resistance. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think there's a theme. Forgive me.
Okay, my name is Sharon Bichner-Marie. I'm from the Water Institute, but I'm a social scientist. I'm actually specialize in corporate governance. And when I started out, I thought I was working on corporates, but it appears I'm not. I'm working on corporates' impact in the commons. And the commons, in this case, the water. And more specifically, the three-dimensional approach of food security, water, and energy. But for my research, I focused on relationships. Corporates doesn't know how to engage outside of their boundaries. They find it hard. To them, it's okay, and it's the only way that they understand is how to comply with, in other words, how to tick the boxes. Some of them try to extend their understanding that it's not their core business. So my role was to help them go over these boundaries, and if we talk about technical stuff, there's this corporate social investment understanding, and then we look at small projects that they do within the fence or behind the fence. It's not visible to the public. So many of these corporates do great work, but we're not aware of that. And we work under the flagships and understanding of water stewardship programs, but it's not that visible. So how does that translate into the impact in the commons space or the public space? And what are the social benefits that you get from this? So the focus being on the corporate social responsibility. So just to say that if we look at water security, healthy water or healthy communities or healthy economies, and I had to go through this whole process of them, first of all, to broaden their role, the corporate role, understanding that if you broaden the corporate role, there's a different understanding of corporate governance, so you have to adjust. From a shareholder perspective to a stakeholder perspective, pursuing multiple bottom lines, and not the fiduciary responsibility to shareholders anymore. And if you talk about the commons, it means that there are diverse understandings. It's a complex environment, ambiguous, and it's bound to be a space where there are disagreements withholding collaborative investments. So from this whole research, I managed to found co-found the Stellenbosch River Collaborative. And why I picked this feather, it reminds me of the dragonfly that we adopt as our symbol. We work closely within the university. The Water Institute works closely with the Complexity Center, but we endeavor to also work with other faculties and departments. Last year I was introduced to the Department of Visual Arts and Communication, and we did something for the Stellenbosch River Collaborative. We had stop frame animations designed for us, and this river puppet speaking about his life in the river. And it was a very big experience. They built this puppet that had to be moved into the gallery, University of Stellenbosch, and it started to vomit paper and all kinds of stuff. And it's really it's in your face, and it starts to shed its hide and everything, and it's the what's left of this. To understand what the impact of humanity is, and by turning away, not taking up the responsibility. So I was very tempted to have what I think is the vertebrae, is to stand up to your responsibility. It's not about accountability anymore. If we talk about sustainable development and growth, we have to understand what our role is. So my focus falls on collaboration, and what collaboration means to corporate actors and how they can engage with the rest of the environment, with the rest of the community, and with regulatory environments. So the Stellenbosch River Collaborative is not a regulatory space, it is an enabling space. Okay, sorry. Keep on.
Good afternoon. My name is Bongo Kwed of Lepu. I'm from Kayamandi. I call myself an art activist. Thank you for inviting me here, because I came here to learn, nothing more. Since we met in 2016, right? Yeah, so I've been working, as an art activist, in my community to develop spaces, and create platforms for people like me as an artist, to find spaces where we can function, where we can express ourselves, which is something that I didn't find, from the young, to be supported as an artist, to express myself, in my spaces, in the township. So working with other people, collaborating with the art of collaboration, helped me to find myself, to be who I am now, and meeting with you guys for sure, Yeah, from 2009 I've been working as an artist with other artists, collaborating with different artists. If you know about InZync poetry sessions, I was there when they were initiated in Kaimandi. I assisted there, so I learned from those guys. There's a project or organization called Kaiman Critic District. So I was also working with them when that was initiated. So I learned a lot from them. We've done a lot of projects in Kaimandi, working with different people. So that knowledge brought me to sort of understanding myself, what I want to do and what is my calling, That's why I call myself as an art activist, because I managed to have my own gallery in Stellenbosch, my own art gallery. There's also the platform for different people in Stellenbosch who are not exposed into arts, knowing what gallery is. Also, how did I begin to know about galleries? I went into town as an artist, seeking for spaces to showcase my work. I went to exhibitions, meeting people there, exchanging mind, so I grow from there. So Art of Collaboration, that's what I've been doing, since 2009. So when it is like presented now, like, oh, yeah, this is what I've been doing all along. Yeah. So
It's just like this word activist. Why is that?
Being active,
Disturbing society
as an artist,
Why was an actor?
Not disturbing the community, but what activists now is being disturbing. I don't know if maybe they are disturbing, but for myself, it's more about, developing spaces, bringing things into the people so that they can.
You're a catalyst for changing the mind of people to gravitate them.
Thank you.
This activist business.
So
we're not in parliament.
No, but that's what he's comfortable. So.
Yeah, no, I thank Father for that knowledge.
So be careful what you're comfortable with. It could be actually something that is the society will not
that's
understand.
what he's comfortable with. So
No, it's good. It's just
You want to
knowledge.
be okay? I see. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to be.
Which party are you going to develop?
Yeah, so that's why I became to be, finding myself, because I've been collaborating with a lot of people. So I did find myself, okay. My calling is to connect people, using art, because I haven't been connected with people through art.
Yeah.
It just happened, by collaborating and opening myself with people. So I was chatting with my brother here, I was asking of what I was doing, or what I'm doing currently, what I'm doing in just life in general. So I told him I'm an art activist. Same as Father, So,
I'm not criticizing
no,
what
it's
you
fine.
are defining yourself to be. I'm criticizing the society's adoptive
Allow me to
mindset
express
about
myself.
what an
Yes,
activist
Father.
So what
is.
we're seeking to do
Allow
here is
me to
that when the
express
person
myself.
has the object, that is their space.
Yes, I have that.
You have the object.
So yeah. So I was talking to my brother, telling him of what I'm doing and being an activist, going back to school, telling him that I didn't have, sort of space to express myself in school, so we had to engrave the desks, and mess up around because we were called that we were disruptive, we were not behaving in school. But there was no such space for me to express myself, So it go to the community now. Other guys, they drop out in school because they cannot listen.
Yeah.
They cannot focus in classes. So I'm sort of like playing a brother to other brothers,
Yeah.
Brother that I didn't have, sort of guiding myself, in arts. Yeah, so this is what I'm doing. So holding this, my name being Kwelo. Kwelo means, sort of bring awareness, So I sort of see this as sort of a shaker to me because I'm exposed into music. I've been performing as a poet, in my own language. So I see this as a shaker, So it sort of calls, people, So you called me, to learn. So I'm doing the township as I call people, using arts, so okay, let's have dialogues, what is art, to you, and if I maybe draw something there, then we can talk about it, around the social issues in the community, our challenges we faced with water, everything, So yeah, this is a shaker to me. I don't know what it is. Yeah.
It's a baobab.
Oh.
Baobab.
Yeah. Great.
From Baobab 3.
Thank you.
Ancient.
There
Maybe you can feed that too.
Thanks for the enlightening presentation. I really enjoyed it. And thanks for inviting me. I met Mish a couple of weeks ago when you were here. I was busy preparing my lunch, so now I understand why, because food is a major part of it, yes. Two comments. You were extremely brave for taking the Shosholoza mail. Major street cred there. Because I'm doing my PhD fieldwork in the art. So I've got a couple of options, either drive, take the bus, or the train. And the train is my favorite one, but my family hates it. Seeing that, there's major train delays and, safety issues. So, yeah, respect, serious respect. Yeah, it was enlightening. Yeah, that's basically all I can say. All the best. Hopefully we can collaborate somehow.
Share a little of what you bring to CST.
Mark has got a research group headed by Hola and Megan. It's renewable energy for transitions. There's quite a few master's students, a couple of PhD students, and we're looking into economic development in South Africa's renewable energy program. A lot of the solar farms and the wind farms are situated in the Eastern Cape, the Northern Cape. That's where I do my field work. So yeah, that's what I'm basically doing. Oh yes, and the other comment was during my PGD in 2014 at the Sustainability Institute, Eve mentioned that she had a a learning and listening buddy.
Something that will do.
Yes, and that for me always stuck, because I think that if you have somebody to, if you have that soundboard, a lot of your findings, your research would pan out very differently to just you being a solo, going crazy in your head type of thing. So that was quite interesting to hear again that you guys are doing it on a more full-time basis. So, thanks for inviting me again.
I'm aware that we're sort of coming up to our 10-2, but I'm also just going to check in. We have got beautiful wine and cheese and dips after this. Are there any people who are needing to leave at 6 precisely? Right, that's where it goes.
Well, so we had the luxury and the necessity to have this time yesterday, and we explored this, and I had the feather as well, so I enjoyed that tremendously. And Flora chose this one, and she, I think in the sense of tracking, kind of talked about the luxury and the sensuous and just having fun. And I think sometimes the gravitas of the work that we do brings a gravity to our own spirit in a way that doesn't serve the work, and I don't think it always serves us. And so I think the critical importance, it was so beautiful to see those images, Rika. I forgot that we had these incredible encounters, these, what art unlocks and evokes in us. And I reflected with a few others as well that when we had that exhibition with Sujay, we started to have all these children come and leave artwork on our desks. And at first they were kind of mimicking what Sujay had done as a style, but then it just went wild from there. And so I think what art invokes, invites, but potentially unlocks, and this may be building on yesterday, that is within us. But when we lose the joy and the sensuousness of it, and yeah, I think it's the unimaginable, but sometimes it's also the most simple, the most essential. So I'm very excited at this idea of the artful, but what that invites is the playful, and where we get to have a hell of a lot more fun. Because I think life's just far too short for anything else. And the work is so important that it deserves it as well. So I want to thank you for that. that's been a lovely gift as well. And if there's anybody else that I can pass it on to, just a slow pause, just in case. Yeah.
We're trying to walk the talk of sustainability, so we have a community-supported agriculture scheme on the land that serves the needs of about 180 households in Coventry with box schemes. But we have the possibility of further developing or evolving the site to include small, medium enterprises, micro businesses, presently cottage industries at different points in the food chain, from seed multiplication to the preparation of compost to food processing and actually retailing food. And the vision there is to offer a space for fairly disenfranchised groups in Coventry. Coventry is a city in England which is at the top of the food poverty list. And we're working a lot on issues of food justice in Coventry, and we're hoping that the place that we could be developing could provide a very good learning environment for people who want to acquire skills that could provide income, jobs, but also address some of these terrible problems that we face of obesity, diabetes, which are, the country has the largest number of food banks, and needed to say these problems of ill health caused by eating the wrong types of food are devastating the health of young people. So that's an ambition, and we feel that it's going to be very important to encourage very different approaches, very different ways of knowing, to connect with different publics and different actors. So I mentioned theatre, but equally art, but also hard-nosed political studies. So we're a bit playful with our imagination, a bit utopian, but there's an element of playfulness that's always utopian. It's about recreating the world. So Corps is a pretty refreshing place, and I hope that we can continue, a relationship and exchanges and grow over the years. And we're not just talking about 2 years, it's a longer term process. Because fundamentally it's about changing paradigms for better futures and inventing very different futures. And that's important. It's a tall order to speak in this way, but that I think all of you are convinced of the need to shift in major ways given the magnitude of the social, environmental, economic crisis we're faced with, and the speed with which things are happening. So, and it has to be playful. I think it was, who was it, that lovely feminist and anarchist Emma Goldman, who said, I don't want to be part of your revolution if I can't dance.
Yeah. Yes.
So, on that I'll close with the lightness of a feather.
Beautiful. Welcome to you, Monsieur Charles. You've come for the part of the wine and the cheese, so you won't miss out on things, and we will catch you up. But we're just bringing this part to a little full stop. It's not the end, because Jess has to leave, and if I may just bring a little wrapping up, because I think we can continue a little bit more once Jess has had to go. But just to say, part of the emergence, the responsiveness, the unknowing, and the trust, exchange and surrender has meant that our beloved Michelle, who is also a friend, Jess, who has also become a friend through our work, Rika, there's a sort of crazily wondrous, resonant synergy which has evolved through our relationships. I didn't know about CST, I didn't know about the SI, I didn't really know about CORE, but through my art and my relationship with Flora, what has emerged is essentially the art of collaboration has evolved through relationship. And the name Art of Collaboration we're keeping very loose in order for it to be an umbrella that is artful. It isn't about art only. It's about the ofness of research, and it's about the collaboration that we've all been taught. I mean, beautiful bongo, yes, you've been doing it, which is why you're here. And it's like, that's all we need to keep doing, is really amplifying what does collaboration mean in all its diversity of ways, through multiple intelligences of the body, and through diversity of culture, age, gender, and sexuality. And I think that maybe what Theo also brought beautifully into the space yesterday was that there is spaciousness. Because if you just had art of collaboration, there'd be no space. So it's the idea that there's space. It's like music. The silence in the music really offers the tune. So, Jess, for your time, for your unbelievable embrace, commitment, dedication, and love. Rika, for this space. And Michelle, essentially we are a core, a CST, and an SI convergence, which is looking to understand how to create this initiative, which, as Michelle, as we all say, as Jess says, it's 5 years to 50 and beyond. So what we're looking to do in the rest of this week, we are based at the SI. We have a studio space. Please feel free to come and continue conversations with us. We're going to continue them here now, but just at a formal level. On Thursday we are meeting again with Vanessa, with Jess, with Rika. Friday we're looking to kind of bring a proposal to sort of a chrysalis of intention, but it's a proposal for all of us, and it's not about us being the ones who carry it or run it. It really is emerging out of our relationship. So thank you for your time. Thanks for everybody. But we can continue. We can continue.
1 minute.
It's just 1 minute.
1 minute.
Okay, what you
I
gonna
think
find?
I've had a couple of people. If we can all stand. I've had everybody asking for playfulness, and I think we're very cognitive about it. And playfulness, we can learn it from who? Who is best to teach us playfulness? Children. So I want us to be children. So just 1 minute. So we're going to tell a story, all of us. And 1 word, not 2 words. We're going to keep the story going just for 1 minute. Let's see how far we can go just telling a story once.
Fun.
A day.
Peace. Peace.
There was.
There.
Okay, let me start. Can we try a very like, you know, let's imagine the story. Let's not be stuck into the words. Once
Upon
No.
Time.
Emerged.
A.
people.
What was that?
Once upon a time there was.
Once upon a time we came together, we never knew each other, now we know each other.
Okay, I think we're gonna go this way. I think we need children this side. Once.
blue. Swallows.
Flying.
Dragonflies. Apples.
Bananas.
I think we need more collaboration. Okay, no. Next time.
No, children never make sense.
Yeah.
No, but once I do this, but when I do it with my 3-year-old and 7-year-old, we follow a story. But it's like,
We did well.
Yeah.
We did radical and we did conventional.
Yeah.
There's something in the middle.
but yeah, you try.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.